Hello, good evening. Uh, Today we're going to be having an interview with our specialist, Daniel Flores. Uh, he's from Honduras, Tegucigalpa. He's living right now in New Orleans, United States. Uh, he is a civil engineer with also a master in civil engineer. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Okay, so uh, today I'm going to ask to you about a special topic. I have read about this new method of creating bricks with plastic materials. They are usually called eco bricks. So I wanted to ask you about what opinion do you have about this type of construction material?
Well, I have several years of experience of different materials that can be used for construction, and recyclable materials a great idea. Um, we should be investigating more about it, how to incorporate these in any type of project in the U.S. or around the world. Um, I have some experience in the U.S. with plastics. Um, However, in the U.S. we really don't use that much recyclable plastic materials because the standards of plastic in the U.S. are very strict. And the government has many regulations that prohibit the use of materials that do not follow the ASTM, the American Standard Testing and Materials um, Association, and IBC, which is the International Building Code. Those are basically the entities that control the materials that can be used for construction. And unless the recyclable materials could follow those standards, they cannot be uh, mainstreamed in construction use in the U.S. Um, I know that the information that's available out there is in other countries like Colombia, right? They used them before, and it's a cheap alternative from what I know. It's much cheaper than any other regular construction material. Uh, I do believe it's a good idea. Um, and I think it should be mainstreamed in the rest of the world, but the U.S. would probably take a little longer to
For
get
example,
it in there.
for example,
Yes.
as a special project of graduation, I would like to use these types of bricks uh, because the main idea of creating these bricks is to reduce the plastic waste in Honduras, for example, or in La Ceiba, that is the place where I live. So I was thinking about these bricks, especially because they could reduce the contamination. For example, uh, all those plastic bottles and plastic materials such as bags, and that could be pick up, clean ACD, and also used to help like poor people. Because I think poor people could be the ones that could be benefit by this. So as a project, for example, a future project, I would like to ask like what are some difficulties that can be expected in having this project.
There's a few things that come to mind. The first thing is that you know they really haven't used these materials a whole lot, so there's not a lot of information out there. So you don't really know exactly how they're going to behave. You know that they've used it for small houses, and that they work. So you're going to be limited to building houses, small houses or small projects for people. Um, because if you wanted to do anything else, it would be dangerous for if you wanted to do an apartment complex or anything like that, or building or hospital, anything like that, it probably would be too dangerous for anybody to live there. Uh, that there's some limitation. I think the information flow is a limit in this case because no, this hasn't been used for many years. In comparison, concrete and steel has been used for thousands of years, and we have lots of good information how to use those products. Um, then the other thing is that there's really not that many people who do this. You'd be very limited on what you can do with the people who know how to do these type of things. You can't really hire. You'd have to train people that know how to work with the materials. You'd have to bring people from where they've done this before. Um, it would be a logistic thing to get it started. Once you do your first project, it would be a lot easier because I don't think it's ever been done in Honduras. That's my first thought. The second thought is that there's some politics associated with this too, because construction costs money. If you ever want to do a project, you're competing against people who need the work. So if the government is willing to spend money on building houses, they're gonna have to pay somebody to do it, and you're taking that opportunity from them. So there would be people who would be upset with you. Uh, these big construction companies have contracts with the government that in which the government tells them, "Oh, we're going to build this many houses to this many people, and we're going to pay you for this." Now, if you introduce something that's much cheaper, even though it's good for the community, there's going to be some political um,
Issues.
complications with it.
Yeah.
Those are the couple things that I see um, for now.
For example, you were mentioning that this could be dangerous. That, for example, I think you mentioned something about it will be able to do this for just small houses, right?
Yes,
So
I understand that that's how they've used them before. They built houses for poor people.
exa-
They really
exactly,
haven't made big buildings.
exactly. Yes. Is that I read about it, and it mentioned something about you cannot have a two-floor house built by this because it could be dangerous. And it mentioned something about making the structure of the house more uh, stable, like using metal or strong materials. So something very important you mentioned about was the that we could get some enemies from doing this, like companies who have a contract with the government. So I want to ask you what license is required to be able to sell these bricks.
Um, well, there's two separate ways of distributing these type of bricks. There's the manufacturers who manufacture the bricks, and there's the distributors who distribute the bricks. The manufacturers in the U.S. have to be certified by the American Standard of Testing and Materials, ASTM, before they can sell any materials. Those materials have to be tested uh, based on very strict guidelines before they can be sold. Now, if they're approved by the government, they can sell them. And then if once the manufacturers get them out, um, you have the distributors. Distributors are like the small hardware stores who buy them for the manufacturers uh, and sell them to the public. Once they get them from the manufacturers, they only have to have a business. In the U.S., for example, and in Honduras, you only have to have a business license to distribute those bricks. Now that's different than from what the construction companies would the issue that construction companies would have because they have an interest of making money out of building stuff. Um, Now that you can sell the bricks and everything, but the person who's going to be putting the houses together are big construction companies, and they're the ones who are going to be have a lot of power in all the world. You know, these big construction companies have a lot of political power. You know, some of our presidents and you know heads of a big construction companies are good friends, and that could be a problem.
Yes. Uh, for example, do you know any company in the U.S. that could make these bricks or that will be interested in making these types of bricks?
In the U.S., I'm sure they could, you know, I'm sure the U.S. would be interested in doing this kind of work, but they wouldn't do it to help the poor people. They really would do it to get points from from the EPA, because what happens is that if you do sustainable projects, you get a reduction in taxes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you know the government would have to pass laws in which there's an advantage of using this type of materials um, for construction so that you can get tax benefits or reduction of liabilities uh, by using your materials.
Okay.
Or you can get, you know, sustainability points. You know, in the U.S. they have a sustainability scale. And basically, they give you some points, and they can certify your building as sustainable, and that's good publicity for the companies that use those type of materials. But again, it hasn't been tested by the ASTM. So until um, a push is made to to pass these materials through the proper channels, I think the companies will stay away from them. At least in the U.S. I think any company who does manufactures any type of building materials would be interested in using recyclable plastic.
Great. For example, can I ask how many years of experience do you have in this area of being a civil engineer?
I've been a civil engineer for 8 years. 8 years. I've worked with wood, steel, concrete, and fiberglass,
And
which
for
is a different type of plastic.
okay,
And we use plastic for a lot of things, not only for building materials, but for pipes
oh really?
and stuff like that. Yeah, like for pipes that like sewage pipes, water pipes, and all that. The plastic is used for all that. But again, it's really strictly um,
Certified plastic.
yeah, so yeah, it's really strictly controlled by um, the testing association.
And for example, during all these years of experience, and you have know many engineers also, uh, do you think they will be willing or they will be able to or accept the idea of building with these types of bricks?
I think if it's limited to small projects, you know, the issues that engineers have to follow the what's in the codes. If it gets incorporated to the IBC, the National Building Code, I think all the engineers will use it. You know, they wouldn't have any problem with that. The problem becomes if it's not part of the IBC, because you know your um, my whole profession is regulated by the IBC. You know, I have a duty to follow those requirements. If I go outside of that, I put myself at risk, and I don't think too many people would be willing to risk that until it's certified by the IBC.
So by hearing all this, uh, you're telling me that the idea of this eco bricks is not as cheap as it sounds.
It is cheap. I think getting into the U.S. would take some time. It wouldn't be difficult. It'd just
Okay.
be time consuming, like because it takes time for for stuff to. I mean, you have to do a lot. Universities would have to do a lot of tests and for the material, and then it would have to be um, basically marketed to the people so they understand what it is and that it works uh, before it could be used. Because in the U.S. the problem is that this is a very litigious society, and people are, if something happens, if something fails, then who's going to be to blame? They're going to be looking for somebody to blame, and unless it's been really well researched in the U.S., it would be a problem. Now, in the rest of the world, I don't see it being a problem. You can do this in Honduras without a problem. In small scale, you do a few houses, nobody would care, and you start building thousands of houses and taking the opportunity from other big companies, then you might get into a problem. But bigger scale, you would have to definitely clear some political hurdles.
So I want, as a conclusion, for you to tell me what do you think about this idea. Uh, what do you think could be done here in Honduras to make this possible, or what decisions could be taken?
Well, I think you can start by getting in contact with the people who've done this before, and they can kind of tell you, we've used these, we've manufactured these materials in Colombia. For example, I know that they used it over there because they could tell you firsthand if what needs to be done to do something like this. The next thing would be basically talking to like the mayors and the leaders of the small towns and telling them what your idea is and how they can implement it. They kind of have an idea of what what needs are one needs every community has, and they may be some towns that might be happy to do this. They may have a lot of problem with plastics, and they may have a lot of people who are looking for work. Um, I think you know once you contact those two different type of people, I think you can get this project rolling.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for your time, for helping with this interview. It was a pleasure for me to have you. Uh, Thanks really for your help, and I hope you have a nice day. Thank you a
Thank
lot.
you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.